I just didn't feel, and I don't feel that music made by machines. I still don't like it. I never liked it then. I don't like it now, and I ain't gonna like it tomorrow, you know.
Country music icon Buck Owens is well known for popularizing his groundbreaking Bakersfield sound and bringing it to a new audience. Buck Owens, a gifted songwriter and singer, and the Buckaroos enjoyed enormous commercial success, with legendary artists such as Ray Charles and the Beatles covering their tunes. But when Buck Owens mysteriously disappeared for a few years in the middle of his career, it left fans bewildered. The riddle of Buck Owens' contentious absence can now be unraveled, nearly 2 decades after his death. On a little farm in Sherman, Texas, Alvis Edgar's Buck Owens Jr. came into this world on August 12, 1929. He was born to sharecroppers Alvis Edgar Owens Sr. and Macy Azel Owens, who were also struggling to provide for their expanding family of 4. As soon as they reached puberty, the Owens children were anticipated to begin laboring in the fields. Buck was supposedly named after one of the family's farm donkeys. Alvis Jr. came into the home one day proclaiming that his name was likewise Buck, when he was around 3 or 4 years old. He became known as Buck when his family approved of his name change. There was a long history of music in the Owens family. The children of pianist Macy Owens were introduced to gospel music during their regular church trips. At some point, the Owens became members of a Southern Baptist congregation. Buck Owens went to Garland, Texas public school for 1st through 3rd grade. Despite living through the Great Depression and Dust Bowl, the Owens family relocated to Mesa, Arizona in 1937. About 2.5 million individuals were forcibly migrated to the West Coast during this terrible period in American history. Nearly half of the people made it to California. In order to protect his family's possessions from the pervasive droughts and starvation that were affecting the plains, Alvis Owens constructed a trailer. After that, they all packed into a Ford sedan and headed west, including Macy, the 4 children, Buck's Uncle Vernon, Aunt Lucille, their baby boy, and Macy's mother. The 10 travelers only paused to eat and rest. Mesa, Arizona is where Buck Owens went to public school. He realized how much he hated doing homework while he was there. Owens would fulfill his class participation requirements by singing and performing in school plays. Consequently, he started participating in chances that required him to perform whenever they came his way. As a present, his father gave the budding musician an inexpensive electric steel guitar and an amplifier that the father had built out of a used radio. After learning a few basic chord progressions from his mother, Owens taught himself the rest. In little time at all, he had mastered the mandolin, drums, horns, and guitar. Owens started working as a harvester and fruit mover when he was 13 years old, leaving school to do so. While helping out on the family farm, he also followed his passion for music. In 1945, Buck and Therrell Ray Britton co-hosted a radio program that was named Buck and Brit. Also, they would perform at local watering holes. Owens and Britton were given permission by the venue owners to sell hats during these performances, with 10% of the revenues going to them. They wound up becoming the house band at the Romo Buffet in Phoenix. Buck Owens was really embarrassed by his family's low-income way of life. To him, music was a means of evading the social and economic problems that had long dogged the Owens family. Owens was a regular at the neighborhood watering holes by the time he was 16 years old. The guitarist for Bob Wills' Texas Playboys, Jimmy Weibel, was one of his early heroes. At about the same time, he met Mac Manatee, who had a gas station in Mesa and was the band's organizer, Mac's Skillet Liquors. As a member of the group, Owens contributed his steel guitar playing. In addition to her time with the Skillet Liquors, Bonnie Campbell, an aspiring singer, joined the band. Buck would eventually marry Bonnie, and she would have children of her own. The demands of providing for an expanding family hit Owens hard with the births of his 2 boys in 1948 and 1950, respectively. Owens was determined to end the cycle of poverty that had plagued him since his childhood. He couldn't provide for his family at that time because of how successful he was as a musician. Thus, he persisted in his career as a truck driver. He became friends with Mark Robinson, a fellow truck driver and aspiring vocalist. Under the alias Marty Robbins, Robinson sang Eddie Arnold tunes at local honky-tonks. At the Astor Hotel in Phoenix, Marty sat in on Owens' performance of Hank Williams tunes. Bonita Campbell was wed to Buck Owens on January 13, 1948. Bonnie was 4 months along in her pregnancy with the couple's first kid when this happened. On May 22, 1948, Alan Edgar Owens, most often known as Buddy, came into this world. Michael Lynn Owens was born to them on March 8, 1950, about 2 years after they were married. Owens and Bonnie's interest in Phoenix had waned by May 1951. Bakersfield is a city in the San Joaquin Valley in California, some 100 miles north of Los Angeles, and they thought it was time to move there. In the 1930s and 1940s, when the oil and agricultural sectors were thriving, Bakersfield became a sanctuary for Dust Bowl refugees, similar to how Texas and Oklahoma had been before to the commencement of the bowl. Bakersfield also had a thriving country music culture, which made it an unexpectedly profitable place for budding country performers. One of Bakersfield's most famous musicians, Bob Wills, is widely believed to have been the genre's progenitor. Not to mention Rose and the Maddox brothers were regulars at the local venues. Bonnie and Owens also divorced in 1951. The pair stayed friendly friends after their breakup, but little is known about why they did it. Soon after his arrival in Bakersfield, Owens became a member of a band that was being led by another steel guitarist, Dusty Rhodes. The Blackboard, Bakersfield's premier country music nightclub, also welcomed Owens to their house band 4 months later. From September 1951 until May 1958, he was a member of Bill Woods and the Orange Blossom Playboys. Central California's top dance band, the Playboys covered a wide range of musical styles, including country, polka, pop, R&B, and even rumbas. Owens thought he was recruited to play lead guitar when he joined the band. To his amazement, he learned that Woods had been scouting him for a singing role. There were no monitor speakers for musicians back then, so Owens had to learn how to project his voice. He began to specialize in playing a certain instrument as his musical abilities grew. A solid-body Fender Telecaster replaced his electric Gibson L7 archtop. Invented in 1950 as the Broadcaster, the new guitar was a game-changer created by Leo Fender of Fullerton, California, who specialized in steel guitars. The Telecaster's attached strings, which were evocative of a vintage steel guitar, gave it a distinctive sound that was at once sharp and jittery. The second-hand Telecaster, which had been owned by Louis Talley before, was purchased by Buck for $35. An integral part of Buck Owens' sound and career, the Telecaster would go on to become famous. Due to his skill on the Telecaster, Owens was able to get many recording sessions. His session with Tommy Collins on the 1954 smash single You Better Not Do That was recorded at Capitol's Los Angeles facilities in September 1953. In the song's introduction, he displays his distinctive twisted note technique. Collins's debut single scored a #2 smash on the country music charts with this tune. The impact that Owens had on a few Capitol Records execs was immediately apparent. From 1954 to 1958, the emerging talent was featured heavily on songs by the company's chief of audio and recording, Ken Nelson. Nelson took a special interest in the artist. A plethora of lesser-known musicians, including Stan Freberg, Wanda Jackson, Farron Young, Sonny James, and Tommy Sands, include Owens on their records. Rockabilly guitarist Owens owes a great deal to his idols, Little Richard and Elvis Presley. Also, he was able to book sessions at Bakersfield's Lutal recording studio, run by Louis Talley, his previous Telecaster player, because of his abilities. Fans of truck driving music would adore Terry Fell's Truck Driving Man, 1954, which he recorded at Lutal Studios. He performed harmony vocals and played guitar. Buck Owens didn't start recording his own music until 1956. Owens created the 1956 rockabilly single Hot Dog under the alias Corky Jones for the unassuming Pep label. He decided to use a pseudonym so that his future country music career wouldn't be hampered by the recording of the rock and roll tune. Recording Down on the Corner of Love followed, and it was well received. Nevertheless, the song's low sales figures were a result of its sloppy distribution. James O'Gwyn, Bobby Bare, Red Sovine, and many others would cover the song when it became a classic. In 1956, following his amicable divorce from Bonnie, Owens would tie the knot again. After courting for a year, Owens tied the knot with Phyllis Buford. The singer's third son, Johnny Dale Owens, was born to Buford and Owens on May 9, 1956. During this period, Owens crossed paths with Harlan Howard, a Michigander and aspiring musician. Jan Howard, who would later become Howard's wife, was also a budding country music singer when they met after relocating to California. Owens and Harlan started collaborating on songs, with Harlan's lyrics taking center stage. Furthermore, in order to publish their music, the duo established Blue Book Music. Back then, Blue Book was just as honest as Owens's modest origins. Nobody, however, could have prevented Blue Book from having such an effect on Owens' career. Owens was signed to Capitol Records by Ken Nelson in 1957. But the first singles that Owens released were not successful commercially. This left Owens so disillusioned that he ran away to Tacoma, Washington for a couple of months. During his time in Washington, Owens formed a friendship with a teenage violinist from Tumwater named Donald Eugene Ulrich. Ulrich would later record under the moniker Don Rich and contribute significantly to Owens's best albums. After seeing Rich perform at South Tacoma's Steve's Gay 90s restaurant, Owens approached the adolescent to discuss the possibility of working together. They started performing fiddle music at various places in the area and eventually got a mention on the weekly Bar K Jamboree on KTNT TV 11. Around the same time, Owens began his career in the music industry as a disc jockey and ad salesman at K, a radio station in Tacoma, which he co-owned with another man. When Capitol Records asked Owens to record a couple more songs in 1958, he went back to Bakersfield. In contrast, Owens recorded 4 original songs this time around using a steel guitar and violin. His first country success, Second Fiddle, peaked at number 24 on Billboard's country music list and was one of these recordings. This single's popularity prompted the band to rehearse, and the result was 1959's Under Your Spell Again, which peaked at #4 on the charts. Before making his way back to Bakersfield, Owens made an effort to get Rich to accompany him to California. While Rich was singing at local venues, he also decided to spend the year teaching music at Centralia College. He also tutored on the side. On the other hand, Don Rich moved in with Owens in Bakersfield in December 1960, following the success of their collaboration on Second Fiddle and Under Your Spell Again. Rich stayed with Owens for a while before returning home to marry his longtime fiancée, Marlene. Also, Jan and Harlan had relocated to Nashville before. Owens was completely alone. Harlan Howard's portion of Blue Book Music and Capitol's ravenous producers were his only remaining possessions. However, Owens's album with Don Rich solidified his status as a rising talent. He won the Most Promising Country and Western Singer of the Year award from Billboard magazine in 1960. Owens was determined to fulfill his lofty goals. Together with a bassist and a pedal steel guitarist, he assembled a band. Until Merle Haggard, an early bass player, gave the group the moniker the Buckaroos, the band had no name. Players throughout the years, and they would become instantly identifiable by their distinctive fiddles and guitars in red, white, and blue. Owens was approached with the song Act Naturally, written by Johnny Russell at the beginning of 1963. Don Rich's excitement persuaded Owens to record the tune with the Buckaroos, even though Owens first had a negative reaction. The song's recording session took place on February 12, 1963, and its release date is March 11, 1963. By June 15th, the song had already begun its 4-week dominating run at the top of the charts. In 1965, the Beatles recorded a cover version of this song with Ringo Starr on lead vocals. It would go on to become Owens' first #1 hit. In 1988, Starr and Owens would record a duet version of the song. Starting with Act Naturally, Owens went on to have 20 consecutive #1 singles. Love's Gotta Lie topped the charts for 16 weeks, and I've Got a Tiger by the Tail reached #20 in the pop charts. Officially, this was how Owens' new sound was introduced. His style was intense, dynamic, and full of life. Owens' music would be identified by these features. From 1962 to 1968, Owens would employ this style, which he described as having a freight train quality, and was influenced by the dancey songs of Bob Wills. Officially, Owens discovered his sound. He only needed to make a few minor adjustments to his original melodies and lyrics to become wildly popular with his unique styles. The late 1960s were a fruitful time for Buck Owens. Following the popularity of Act Naturally, Carnegie Hall in New York City was reserved for a performance by Buck Owens and the Buckaroos. Country music was extremely unusual in New York City, much less at Carnegie Hall. Therefore, this performance was groundbreaking in and of itself. Recording the performance for an album was Capitol Records' insistence, which only served to further annoy the musicians. A potential failure of the concert and album was a source of concern for Owens and the Buckaroos on March 25, 1966. Yet the live album was a huge hit, topping both the pop and country charts simultaneously. Renowned R&B artist Ray Charles helped spread the word about the album by releasing cover versions of 2 songs, Crying Time and Together Again. Usually, when a musician discovered their magic recipe for making songs, they would use it to their full potential by creating and recreating several renditions of the same sound. This trend first appeared in the 1920s with the music of Jimmie Rodgers, whose iconic blue yodels adhered rigidly to the same fundamental framework. Hits by Hank Williams and Ernest Tubbs, among many others, followed similar patterns. Charlie Pride faced accusations of oral recycling in the 1970s due to his prolific output of songs that sounded identical. Contrasted with the cosmopolitan country of Jim Reeves and Eddie Arnold, Buck Owens stood out by making music that was new, simplified, and sounded modern. Country music was being redefined by Owens and the Buckaroos. They came to the studio ready to take on the task. They had practiced and prepared. In his day, Buck Owens was considered an expert and meticulous. He insisted on recording a limited number of takes in order to get the ideal edit, justifying his decision by saying that this would better capture the spirit of spontaneity. After their strategies took root, the Nashville music scene quickly recognized the distinctive West Coast influences and elevated the regional designation to the status of a distinct musical subgenre. With the release of his full West Coast country album and the single Truck Drivin' Man, George Hamilton IV was among the first musicians to do this. The style that Owens and the Buckaroos developed was called the Bakersfield sound. It was a high-energy, electrifying hybrid of honky-tonk, hillbilly, rock and roll, and R&B. Their talent was unparalleled, and it allowed them to expand country music's audience. The Beatles loved them after their popularity, especially Ringo Starr. Roy Wood's cover of Act Naturally wasn't the first time that Owens and Rich were fans of the Beatles' early music. Legend has it that the two of them had an obsession with the Beatles' discography and would often practice their Liverpool accents together. After performing with the Buckaroos for President Lyndon B. Johnson in 1968, Buck Owens would go on to a successful career that year. Also, J.D. Manis joined the Buckaroos as a pedal steel guitar player, which helped them reach #1 with Tall Dark Stranger and Who's Gonna Mow Your Grass. Hee Haw, a successful CBS variety show, was co-hosted by Owens and Roy Clark from 1969 to 1986. Country music performances were interspersed with humorous skits and shorts on the show. When he was a cast member on the show, Owens was hugely popular. The program, which ran for 24 seasons and 231 episodes, was originally proposed as a country spin-off of Laugh-In with Rowan and Martin. Between 1968 and 1970, Owens appeared on a few additional television shows, including The Ed Sullivan Show, The Dean Martin Show, The Jimmy Dean Show, and The Jackie Gleason Show. Owens' apprentice Susan Ray had started working with him by 1970. With Owens as her producer, Ray went on to become a famous solo performer, and the Buckaroos enjoyed a run of successful duets with her. The loss of Doyle Holly in 1971 was a major setback for the band. An integral part of the band's sound, Holly's distinctive deep booming drawl earned him the Academy of Country Music's Bass Player of the Year honor the previous year. Only Rich and Owens, two of the founding members, remained. The pair had a hard time breaking through in the early 1970s, despite their previous phenomenal chart success. But because to Hee Haw, they were able to keep their star status. When Made in Japan came out in 1972, the Buckaroos were back in the groove after 3 years of no top hits, 1972. Jerry Brightman's arrival as a steel guitarist broke the band's creative slump. In songs like Arms Full of Pity, Ain't It Amazing Gracie, and Ain't Gonna Have Old Buck to Kick Around No More, Owens got to play the fiddle, steel guitar, and electric guitars, which are his main instruments. Tragically, just as things were looking good, Buck Owens was taken aback, altering the course of his life and career forever. The Buckaroos guitarist Don Rich, who had been Owens' musical partner for many years, lost control of his motorcycle and crashed into a guardrail on Highway 1 in Morro Bay, California, on July 17, 1974. Rich was only 32 years old and was in town on vacation with his family when the accident occurred. According to reports, earlier in the day, Owens had proposed that Rich take a car instead of his motorcycle on the trip. It is said that this was a hint at something related to a future motor accident for Rich, as Owens had pleaded with his collaborator for years before finally giving in and riding the bike. Rich, however, disregarded his friend's worries. In a subsequent interview, Buck Owens revealed, "He was like a brother, a son, and a best friend. Something I never said before, maybe I couldn't, but I think my music life ended when he died." The loss of his best friend and longtime musical collaborator and inspiration had a devastating effect on Owens, and he would never get over it. In 1975, Owens was signed by Andy Wickham, a Warner Brothers Records rep and a lifelong Buck Owens fan. Recording with session players in Nashville was a first for Owens, and his music started to sound less like Bakersfield's rough-around-the-edges style and more like the country pop filler tracks on the radio. Owens, probably because he was emotionally vulnerable, gave up almost all creative control to the producers of these songs. He was at his angstiest in 1980, when Buck Owens finally chose to leave the music industry after 23 years of trying, because none of the tracks he recorded for Warner Brothers made it into the top 10 on the country charts. While many artists of his time dealt with the temptations and pressures of the entertainment industry, Buck Owens took a long break from the spotlight to recharge and deal with personal issues. He later made a triumphant return and continued to make contributions to country music after his public absence. Some even speculated that the star was secretly battling substance abuse. Nevertheless, just 8 years down the road, Buck Owens would make a triumphant return. Enthralled by Dwight Yoakam, a country singer and longtime admirer of Owens's, the two collaborated on a duet of Streets of Bakersfield. The result was Owens' first #1 single in more than 16 years. Yoakam recalled the encounter thus: "We sat there that day in 1987 and talked about my music to that point, my brief career, what I'd been up to, and how he'd been watching me. I was really flattered and thrilled to know that this legend had been observing me." With Yoakam by his side, Buck Owens resumed traveling for the first time in years, re-energized and eager to present the world a better, more accomplished version of himself. Fans were given unprecedented access to Owens's star power, viewing him not only as the former star of Hee Haw, but also as a master of hard country and honky-tonk, and suddenly, Owens was a star again. In 1988, despite Ken Nelson's recent retirement, he signed with Capitol Records and released a remade version of Hot Dog, a song he had recorded 32 years earlier. Before the country singer began a long, arduous struggle with his health, Streets of Bakersfield would become his final major success. Roger Dean Miller, a close friend and fellow singer-songwriter of Buck Owens, passed away at the age of 56 in 1992 from lung and throat cancer. This tragedy caused many others to have their own medical exams, which ultimately led to a devastating diagnosis for Owens. Owens was diagnosed with throat cancer just 6 months after Miller's death. In the mid-90s, he had a heart attack and had coronary bypass surgery, which is a common procedure for people with heart disease. The throat cancer had a terrible impact on the singer's ability to speak, so he had to start working on Crystal Palace, a museum that was supposed to be a memorial to the star. Unfortunately, the throat cancer was so abrasive that the surgery left him with speech problems. In 1995, doctors discovered malignant lumps in his back. Although he was able to recover from the oral cancer, Owens had further health issues throughout the early 2000s, including a bout of severe pneumonia and a minor stroke in 2004. He continued performing and performed weekly with the Buckaroos at the newly erected Crystal Palace. Sadly, Buck Owens passed away peacefully at his Bakersfield, California, home on March 25, 2006. The cause of death was initially disputed, but it has now been determined that a heart attack was the cause. This tragic event happened in his sleep, just hours after a performance at Crystal Palace, where one audience member said that Owens had announced, "If somebody's come all that way, I'm going to do the show and give it my best shot. I will try my best, even if I may moan and squeak." Owens was honored with an induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 1996. In 2003, he was also named one of CMT's 40 Greatest Men of Country Music, coming in at number 12. In 2005, the Buckaroos were named number 2 on CMT's list of the 20 Greatest Bands. A section of U.S. Highway 82 near Sherman, Texas, is called the Buck Owens Freeway in honor of Owens. He was later inducted into the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame. In country music, Buck Owens is largely remembered for his contributions to the Bakersfield sound subgenre, which is characterized by honky-tonk influences and raw, twangy instruments. Marking moments in Owens' career, songs such as Act Naturally, Together Again, and I've Got a Tiger by the Tail became iconic and contributed to his enduring fame. Country music superstar. Fans all across the globe fell head over heels for his unique singing style, creative words, and infectious songs. Beyond his personal chart success, Buck Owens had a far-reaching effect on country music. Innumerable musicians have been influenced by his groundbreaking methods of songwriting, production, and live performance. His extensive list of musical influences includes not only fellow countrymen like Merle Haggard and Dwight Yoakam, but also rock and roll greats like the Beatles, who covered his song Act Naturally. Even today, artists like Brad Paisley try to mimic Owens' distinctive style in country music. American audiences adored Owens because of his flamboyant theatrical presence and enormous personality. After appearing on Hee Haw, co-hosted by Roy Clark, he became a household name to millions of viewers. His real charisma and endearing appeal won over audiences of all walks of life. He was an iconic figure in popular culture, a trailblazer in the music industry, and a top hitmaker. Fans and other musicians alike still honor his impact and achievements to country music, guaranteeing that they will be remembered for years to come. Over the course of his long and fruitful career, Owens overcame many obstacles, both personal and professional, to maintain his status as a legendary musician. Even after he passed away in 2006, he kept on recording and performing, creating music that will be heard forever and having an impact on generations to come. What a wonderful audience. Pause for a second and watch one of the other videos that are now playing on your screen. I guarantee you won't want to miss out on this opportunity.